A judge ruled today to take the money away from the couple and to account for every single dime that was raised in a GoFundMe account.
They used thousands of it to go on lavish trips, shopping sprees, and to gamble.
A tragedy that shook Frisco, the stabbing, the trial, and the money scandal. When tragedy strikes in a quiet community, it doesn't just affect the people directly involved, it ripples outward like waves on water. On April 2, 2025, the city of Frisco, Texas, was thrown into turmoil when a fatal stabbing at a high school track meet claimed the life of a 17-year-old student. The victim, Austin Metcalf, a junior at Memorial High School, had been a bright, ambitious teenager with dreams of competing in college athletics. That evening, what should have been an ordinary school sports event turned into a nightmare. Witnesses recalled a sudden confrontation near the bleachers, and before anyone could fully grasp what was happening, Austin had collapsed, fatally wounded.
I wonder now if that will ever happen because of what he allegedly did next on April 2nd. That day, Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf got into a confrontation under the tent. According to witnesses, Metcalf told Anthony to leave the team's tent, and at that point, Anthony allegedly reached into his backpack and said something along the lines of "make me." Here's what Austin's twin brother told WFAA-TV.
Despite attempts to save him, he died at the scene. Police quickly identified the suspect, Carmelo Anthony, also 17 years old, a student from nearby Centennial High School. Within hours, Karmelo was taken into custody and charged with murder. The news sent shockwaves across Frisco. Parents, teachers, and students were left in disbelief. Two promising teenagers, their lives shattered, one dead and the other facing a lifetime behind bars. But the story didn't end there. An outpouring of sympathy and millions in donations. In the days following the stabbing, emotions ran high. Families across the community, as well as strangers from around the country, expressed their grief online. Social media became a platform for mourning, but also for heated debates. Was Karmelo acting out of impulse, or was this a premeditated crime?
I asked the grand jury to return a first-degree murder indictment against Carmelo Anthony, which they did.
A Texas district attorney taking to social media to announce Carmelo Anthony is formally facing charges that could lock him up for life.
Soon after his arrest, Carmelo's family set up a GoFundMe campaign, describing the situation as an unfair case and appealing for financial help to cover legal expenses. Donations poured in at an astonishing rate. Within weeks, the fund had raised nearly $10 million. Contributors were reassured that their money was being used for lawyers, expert witnesses, and family support while the Anthony family endured the grueling legal process. At first, the campaign appeared to be a symbol of community generosity, a way for thousands of people to show support. But as investigators later discovered, the truth was far more complicated. Whispers of financial fraud. Months later, while prosecutors were still building their case against Karmelo, another story began to unfold behind closed doors. New documents landed on the prosecutor's desk, financial records that painted a disturbing picture.
My 13-year-old daughter is afraid to sleep in her own bedroom because she's fearful of what might happen to her. And let me be clear, the claims that were used about the public donation to buy a home or anything else are completely false.
Investigators traced large sums of money moving out of the GoFundMe account. Instead of going toward legal bills as promised, hundreds of thousands of dollars had been transferred to a network of offshore accounts. Wire transfers were repeatedly directed to the Cayman Islands and shell companies with no clear business history. Even more troubling was the timing. Many of these transfers happened just days before critical hearings in Karmelo's murder case. The implication was unsettling. The money raised for legal defense might have been used for purposes far different from what the donors believed. The records also revealed that several of the shell companies were tied either directly or indirectly to names associated with Karmelo's parents. Shock and betrayal. As these revelations surfaced, whispers spread quickly. First within the courtroom, then across social media, and soon into headlines nationwide. Donors who had once proudly posted screenshots of their contributions were now furious. One woman, interviewed outside the courthouse, clutched her phone with tears in her eyes. "I gave my last $100 because I believed in their fight for justice," she said. "Now I find out my money might be sitting in some bank account on an island? That feels like betrayal." Screenshots of leaked transaction logs flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The posts spread faster than moderators could remove them. Hashtags demanding accountability began trending. Some users speculated that the offshore transfers were an attempt to hide assets in case of future seizures by the court. Others theorized that the funds might have been used to influence witnesses. Suddenly, the murder case wasn't the only scandal making headlines. The Anthony family was now at the center of a potential federal investigation for money laundering. The Department of Justice steps in. The chaos grew when the lead investigator finally addressed reporters on the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded forward, and with measured words, he confirmed the rumors. The Anthony family was now under official investigation by the Department of Justice for financial crimes. "This is no longer a minor controversy," he said firmly. "We have discovered multiple transactions that appear designed to conceal the source of funds collected through public donations. These funds were solicited under the promise of being used for legal defense. Instead, they were routed through offshore accounts." The announcement was devastating for the defense. It wasn't just about bad bookkeeping or a clerical mistake. It was being framed as deliberate deception. A family's credibility shattered. Inside the courtroom, defense attorneys scrambled to contain the damage. Their argument was that the transfers were simply a way of protecting family investments and shielding money from hostile media coverage or aggressive creditors. But the prosecution swiftly dismantled that claim. Before the GoFundMe money began flowing in, many of those offshore accounts had no history of legitimate activity. They were, as one prosecutor bluntly put it, empty containers perfect for hiding money. The prosecution displayed a massive timeline on a screen. On one side, the stabbing, Karmelo's arrest, and key hearings. On the other, bright red markers showing the offshore wire transfers, each occurring suspiciously close to those major events. The image was powerful, and jurors leaned forward in their seats, their faces tense. "This is not an accident," the prosecutor said, pacing slowly. "This is a pattern." 2 days before a key witness changed their statement, $850,000 was transferred to a shell company. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not coincidence. That is calculated. The weight of the accusation lingered in the room. The public turns. Outside, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Protesters on one side held signs demanding justice for Austin. On the other, supporters of Karmelo's family shouted back, calling the financial scandal a smear campaign. The chants, bullhorns, and camera clicks merged into a wall of noise. Some former donors took matters into their own hands. Flyers with screenshots of the bank records circulated in the crowd. Bold red letters across the top read, "Where's our money?" QR codes linked to leaked documents. There was even talk of a class action lawsuit against the Anthony family to recover donations. News programs across the country dissected the scandal in real time. Financial crime experts explained how offshore accounts were used to disguise illegal transfers. On primetime television, one analyst bluntly stated, "If these accusations are proven, the Anthony family won't just be fighting a murder trial. They'll be facing charges that could lock them away for decades." A case of two battles. By this point, the case was no longer just about whether Carmelo Anthony had stabbed Austin Metcalf. It was about whether his family had been running a secret operation of deception and financial fraud behind the scenes. Prosecutors wasted no time weaving the scandal into their murder case, arguing that the family's willingness to manipulate money showed they were also willing to manipulate the truth. Defense lawyers begged the court for a gag order, desperate to keep jurors from being swayed by the constant media coverage. But the damage was done. What comes next? The trial is ongoing, and the community of Frisco is deeply divided. Some still insist Karmelo deserves a fair defense and that the financial scandal is a distraction. Others believe the revelations prove that dishonesty runs deep within the Anthony family. The truth, however, is still unfolding. Investigators continue to track the money trail, donors are organizing to demand refunds, and the murder trial looms larger with every passing day. What began as a single violent act between two teenagers has spiraled into a legal and financial storm, one that could determine not just Karmelo's fate, but also whether his family spends decades in prison for crimes far beyond the courtroom drama of a stabbing in Frisco. For now, one question hangs heavy in the air. If the family could lie about millions of dollars, what else have they kept hidden? As the day in court comes to a close, the air feels heavier than it did that morning. The judge's face stays firm and controlled, but everyone knows she has already seen enough to understand the seriousness of what has been revealed. Even though she asks the jury to keep an open mind, the truth is hard to bury now. The damage is done. What was once just another criminal case has now turned into something much larger, a scandal that has spilled far beyond the four walls of the courtroom. The headlines are running non-stop, social media is exploding with commentary, and the public can't seem to look away. Every detail, every leaked text, every piece of evidence is being dissected in real time by millions of people who feel like they are part of the jury themselves. For Carmelo Anthony's parents, the nightmare is only getting worse. Every new headline makes it harder for them to convince jurors, donors, or even the general public that they are the real victims. Each revelation paints them in a darker light. Each disclosure chips away at the picture they tried so hard to build. The most devastating blow came when the forensic accountant laid out the trail of money. His testimony was calm but powerful. He didn't speak in vague language. He walked the jury through every account number, every transfer, every movement of funds with almost painful detail. He even pulled up a digital map showing how donations left U.S. banks, traveled through hidden routes, bounced between shell companies, and landed in offshore tax havens. What stunned the courtroom most was how deliberate it all seemed. This wasn't just bad bookkeeping or a quick mistake. It looked like a planned strategy. The layering process, the way the money was broken down, moved around, then channeled back again, was a classic blueprint for laundering funds. And when the accountant explained how some of these shell accounts were opened just days after the murder and stayed dormant until GoFundMe money arrived, the weight of the testimony hit everyone hard. The defense tried to poke holes, but the accountant's responses only made things worse. "It is statistically impossible for that timing to be a coincidence," he said firmly. His words landed like a hammer. Jurors exchanged glances, people in the gallery leaned forward, and even skeptics began to shift in their seats. The mood in the room changed. Suddenly, what once seemed like speculation started to feel like undeniable fact. But the real breaking point came when prosecutors revealed the text messages. That was the moment when the courtroom erupted. These weren't just private notes about bills or general money matters. These were sharp, coded exchanges between Carmelo Anthony's parents and a so-called financial advisor. Phrases like "move the last 300 before Friday" and "we can't risk them freezing it" echoed in the air. And when matched with suspicious bank activity, those words looked like more than just harmless chatter. The gallery gasped, jurors scribbled furiously, and the judge had to bang her gavel to calm the room. The prosecution wasted no time in framing the evidence. These texts weren't about budgeting, they were about hiding money, protecting assets, and silencing anyone who might threaten their scheme. By the time the evidence was shown, the Anthony family's image was already cracking. But when the prosecution connected the advisor in the texts to another federal case involving illegal transfers, the scandal went nuclear. Within minutes, social media was flooded with screenshots. Influencers called it the smoking gun. Hashtags trended worldwide. The court of public opinion had already made its verdict long before the jury would. Even though the judge instructed jurors not to be influenced by outside chatter, everyone knew the reality. The texts had blurred the line between the murder charges and the financial scandal. Now the two stories were inseparable. As the session adjourned, the Anthony family sat stiff at the defense table. Carmelo's father stared straight ahead, stone-faced, as if carved from marble. His mother kept her head down, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Their lawyers whispered urgently, their faces pale and drawn. The pressure was visible. Offshore accounts, incriminating texts, the accountant's damning testimony, all of it hung over them like a storm cloud ready to break. Outside, the courthouse had turned into a circus. Protesters, reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers filled the plaza. Satellite trucks lined the street, bright lights illuminated the night sky, and live broadcasts streamed across the nation. Some shouted for justice for Austin Metcalf, the victim whose name risked being lost in the chaos. Others argued the Anthony family was being unfairly targeted. The crowd was loud, emotional, and deeply divided. Online, the case took on a life of its own. In chat rooms and long discussion threads, amateur sleuths broke down every screenshot and video clip. Some built complex theories about offshore accounts and shadow deals. Others turned the family into villains of an unfolding true crime drama. For many, the murder trial itself was no longer the focus, it was the alleged financial cover-up that had captured their imagination. The Anthony family left through a side entrance, surrounded by security. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved forward, and reporters yelled out questions that went unanswered. Their silence only fueled more speculation. Every step they took away from the courthouse seemed to deepen the mystery around them. Meanwhile, donors across the country were shaken. Many who had given money in good faith now logged into their bank accounts, wondering if their generosity had been twisted into fuel for corruption. For some, it wasn't just about losing money, it was about betrayal. They had believed in a cause, believed in a family in grief, only to now feel deceived. As night fell, one thing was clear: this case was no longer just about crime and punishment. It had become a story about trust, betrayal, and how quickly the truth can unravel even the most carefully crafted image. The Anthony family had once presented themselves as victims seeking justice. Now, they stood accused of manipulating tragedy for gain, of weaving lies so deeply that the line between reality and performance blurred. And the world was watching. Each new revelation, each leaked document, each courtroom twist added another layer to a story that was already overwhelming. The jury had not yet delivered a verdict, but in the public's eyes, a judgment was forming fast. For Carmelo Anthony's parents, the question was no longer just about winning a legal battle. It was about whether they could ever recover from the destruction of their reputation. Because even if the court somehow cleared them, the court of public opinion might never forgive. The genie, as the judge hinted, was out of the bottle. And once the truth escapes, there is no way to put it back. This trial was supposed to be about one crime, one tragedy. Instead, it has exposed something much darker, a web of greed, deceit, and manipulation that has shaken an entire community. No matter what happens when the final verdict is read, this story will live on as a warning that sometimes, behind the smiles and the public sympathy, lies a truth far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. And as the world waits for the next court date, one haunting question lingers in everyone's mind: if this much has already been uncovered, what other secrets are still waiting in the shadows?